Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to look at the best case scenario for Joe Biden in the 2020 upcoming presidential election. So a few conditions really I'd see for Biden to actually go on and win against Trump in kind of a landslide victory. Considering a landslide would probably be around 350 electoral votes, I do think Biden would struggle to get that, but we'll see how it pans out with my predictions regarding his best case scenario and see if he actually could. And then tomorrow or another day, we'll probably do a Donald Trump best case scenario. So we'll start by filling in all the safe Democratic states, assuming these will all be safe in a best case scenario, of course. New York, Illinois, Hawaii, and Maine's 1st District. And then the safe Republican states, ones that I couldn't see getting closer than safe. Montana, I could actually see going likely. We'll just fill that in now. Kansas, I'd probably say would still go safe. Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana. Mississippi would be likely, I think. South Carolina would also go likely in the best case for Biden. Alaska and Alabama and Indiana. So these are the traditionally safe Republican states, but I've got South Carolina, Mississippi, and Montana actually getting slightly closer in a best case scenario for Joe Biden. So we will look at. We'll probably start on the. We'll start on the West Coast as usual. So we'll start in Nevada. I think this will go likely in a best case. Did trend to Trump in 2016. From 2012, Clinton won it by about 2, but Obama won it by about 7, and that's where I could see Joe Biden winning it, especially with trends in Nevada. I don't think it could hit the 10-point safe margin, but I do think it could pretty comfortably hit the 5 at least, definitely, if not get up to the levels that Obama managed to win it by. So we'll move on to Colorado and New Mexico. I don't think these would go safe in a best case. I think New Mexico could actually. Hillary won it by 8, and Obama won it by 10. So I do think that has a reasonable shot actually. But Colorado I see is likely, possibly near 10, possibly around 8 or 9. But I don't think that Biden would be able to win it safe, despite the way that it seems to be trending. We'll move on to Arizona. I think Arizona would go lean in a best case. Of course, this isn't my actual prediction, but I do think that Biden could put in a really solid showing and get it up to around 4 points, the margin. I mean, the polling at the moment in Arizona is showing around a 4-point lead for Biden. I do think ultimately that will narrow down. However, the way that it is trending, I wouldn't put it really past the Democrats of winning this by at least a few points. And in Biden's best case, I do think he could get to around the 4-point mark. We'll move on to Texas. I don't think Texas can flip even in the best case. I do think it could go lean, possibly by around 3. Trump beat Clinton here by about 9, and Romney beat Obama by 16. So with a similar trend, it could narrow down to a couple of points, but I don't think it would trend that much again. But in a best case, it could get pretty close. I do think maybe around 3 points. Before 2024, you're looking at a possible flip, not a likely flip, but a possible one. We'll move on to Nebraska's 2nd. Biden would win this in a best case by a lean margin. It trended to Hillary actually in the 2016 election. I think Romney beat Obama here by about 7, and then Hillary only lost here by around 2 to Trump. Yeah, by about 2. So I think Biden would win this by a few points, maybe like 3 in the best case. It's the kind of district where Biden could do very well, especially with a strong running mate. It's more of a district that would lean towards the more moderate Democrats, so I do think that's why it could go for Biden in the end. We'll look at Minnesota now. In the best case for the Democrats, I think, tempted to say it could go safe, but I do think it would still be under 10. Even I think the best case would see Amy Klobuchar on the ticket here for obvious reasons. But I can't see it going safe purely because of how much it did narrow down with Trump in 2016, and Trump does have a fair amount of appeal here. Not as much as as Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, but he still does have a bit. There is a bit that carries over. But I do think maybe 8 or 9 points would be the best case scenario for Joe Biden in Minnesota. Iowa's a tough one. I mean, we had a recent poll out of Iowa which saw Trump up 2, and that was from PPP, which is generally, if you look into their polling, it does skew slightly Democratic. So even in a best case for Biden, I think Trump would still win here by a tilt margin. I think Joe Biden doesn't have the most appeal in somewhere like Iowa compared to, like, I could see, for example, if Bernie was the nominee, I think his best case could see a win in Iowa because of his appeal to the white working class, and that could really challenge Trump. But I think Biden he's not the most kind of populist candidate that can really fire up voters, and I think even in his best case he wouldn't be able to pull it off, regardless of who his running mate is. We'll move down south now, so we will look at Florida. Biden would win Florida in the best case, probably by, again, around like the 3-point margin, maybe 2. I mean, Florida's always a close one. Trump won it by 1 back in 2016. Biden could flip it for reasons such as his primary victory. You could see how much he drove up turnout in the primaries. Obviously, Obama won here twice, and that, of course, that doesn't instantly translate to a Biden victory, but it does. It does give Biden a nice kind of, I guess, a nice indication of what could happen if his campaign goes really well and Trump's goes a lot less successfully. We'll look at Georgia now. Similar to kind of Texas, I think Georgia would narrow down a bit more than Texas in the best case. I think it would require a candidate like Stacey Abrams for it to get to a tilt margin. But I don't think it would flip to the Democrats. I reckon maybe around a 1 or 2 point win would be the best case for Biden. I don't think it's ready to flip over yet. I think the Republican base here is just a bit too strong still, especially with despite Florida, the bordering state, possibly going to the Democrats. I think the Panhandle, the kind of bit very bordering Georgia, it doesn't look like the best kind of place for the Democrats to make gains. So I think Georgia, I mean, you'd have similar voters kind of in this area of the Panhandle and the border of Georgia, similar trends. So I can't see it flipping just yet. I think similar to Texas, maybe 2024 or 2028 it could. Move up to North Carolina. I do think Biden would win here in a best case. Probably by a tilt margin, not quite lean. I do think between 1 and 2 points would be his victory in a best case. I mean, my prediction is that Trump will actually win here, but I think Biden, with increased African American turnout, very dependent on his running mate, granted. But yeah, with that increased turnout and just the nature of the state, really, I do think it could flip. Obviously, it went to Obama back in 2008 by a very, very narrow margin, and then to Romney. yeah, I do think that it would have a chance, especially with their governor looking like holding on. Very popular Democratic governor here. Tom Tillis, the senator, looks like he may be in trouble in the Senate in his election in November. So I think looking at the state as a whole and all the elections happening in the state, I think if they're going to kind of lean to the Democrats, I think Biden might have a chance here to win. I think Virginia, in a best case, could actually possibly go safe. I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch. I think it would only just about scrape 10 in a safe scenario. Clinton won it by 5 despite her huge unpopularity, whereas Obama only won it by 4 in 2012. So I think the trends in the state, along with Biden being drastically more popular than Hillary, I do think that it could just about knock it into the safe margin, just over 10. Move up to Ohio. Ohio is an interesting one. I do think it is a tough one, isn't it? I do think that Biden could win here by a tilt margin. My reasoning is that obviously Iowa went for Trump by a slightly larger margin than Ohio back in 2016. They're both incredibly volatile states. That's partly why it's so hard to call. Ohio's polling looks a lot better for Joe Biden than Iowa. He's had an average of around 6 in the 3 polls that I've seen over the past few weeks. Well, the polls themselves haven't been the past few weeks. The polls themselves have been kind of at back end of 2019, early 2020. But I do think that Biden, based on those numbers kind of alone, I do think that he may scrape a victory in a best case scenario. My prediction is that he won't win here ultimately. But in a best case scenario, I think those polls would still narrow down, but Biden could just about hold on in Ohio, whereas Iowa, the polling data looks a lot worse for him than it does in Ohio. So we'll move up to the northeast. We'll move up to New Hampshire. I think this would go likely in the best case. I mean, Biden did pretty atrociously here in the primaries, yet Trump's unpopularity here is it's high, and it still seems to be going up, really. So my actual prediction, I would say New Hampshire would go more lean, but I think likely is a very, very possible scenario, especially in a best case. I do think that Biden could win by, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 points. I mean, even Hillary Clinton held on here. And when you have her winning a state like New Hampshire, I do think that Biden can pretty convincingly add a few percentage points margin onto that, and drag it up to likely. So we'll move on to Maine at large. Biden would win here again, probably by a likely margin in the best case. Hillary won by I believe around 3 in 2016, which that in itself is a decent margin. So Biden again will probably improve on that by a few points. He actually did win in the primaries here as well. Maine second is a very tough one, but again, I do think that Biden could just about squeak out a victory in a best case. I knew Trump did win here by almost 10 in 2018, but the midterms gave a pretty strong indication for the Democrats, actually, that it's a very volatile district, and for the right candidate, it can swing by a drastic amount, shown by Trump in 2016. And I do think that it could swing back. Again, as I say, mainly based on the midterm result. Now the crucial Rust Belt. We'll start with Pennsylvania, Biden's home state. I think in a best case, Biden still wouldn't win likely, but I do think he would win lean, possibly by around 4. Polling does look quite good here, and we've seen kind of 5 or 6 point aggregate average for Biden in Pennsylvania. Michigan, I think, could actually go likely in the best case, maybe by only around 6. But again, the polling does look pretty solid here. And I mean, Trump's popularity in the Rust Belt doesn't really look very solid at the moment. So I can see Biden flipping Michigan by a decent margin. And then finally, the state of Wisconsin, I do think, again, would go to Biden in the best case, probably by a lean margin as well. Smaller than Pennsylvania, maybe only by around 3, even in a best case, possibly 4. But the polling aggregate here shows him ahead by about 3, but you have to consider back in 2016, Wisconsin was the worst state of them all in terms of the actual result being outside the margin of error from the polling. And then, so yeah, I think just looking at some conditions for Biden to achieve the best case scenario, I do think Donald Trump's approval would have to drop to around the 40% mark. A pretty big ask, but if you look at the current situation with the coronavirus, it's really not helping him. He's not doing himself a lot of favours with the current climate. Not that you could blame something like the economic impact on Trump exactly, but just his handling, the way that he's talking about it, I don't think it sits well with a lot of people. So yeah, I do think his approval would have to drop to around 40. It's currently sitting just below 45. So I do think it's possible, but it is a bit of an ask still, even if the coronavirus issue sits around for a few more months up until the election itself. Biden's current lead in polling is currently around 4.4. Well, it is 4.4 based on the polling aggregate. So that has dropped a little. I do think he would have to improve this ever so slightly, maybe win the popular vote by possibly around 4 to 5 points, maybe slightly higher, in order to achieve the best case that we've looked at. And I do think the whole Tara Reade accusation would have to be resolved as quickly as possible for the Biden campaign, because it does look like it could possibly affect him a little bit. It does seem like it has already. The last few weeks, his polling average has dropped a couple, whereas Trump has actually risen despite the coronavirus situation. So I do think that would have to kind of be removed from the spotlight and get resolved as quickly as he can. Because if you look at, just thinking ahead to like the debates, what leg has Biden got to stand on in what he says about Trump and the way that Trump treats women? If Biden cannot resolve the accusation from Tara Reade, and how, you know, it doesn't really bode well in a debate style with Trump attacking Biden on it, because I expect Trump to be pretty vicious in the debates. I mean, he went vicious in 2016. I don't think there would be any reason for him to change. So yeah, I think that's overall, that is where I see things in a best case for Joe Biden against Donald Trump. And thank you very much for watching. And tomorrow, so we've got actually Biden just about getting that landslide, as I mentioned, at 353 and Trump on 185. Yeah, anyway, thank you very much for watching. And let me know what you think in the comments. Please like the video if you enjoyed, and I'll be back tomorrow with a new video.